Hey there, friends. Welcome to Gemini season. I started diving deep into the topic of light and shadow self during Gemini's turn around the sun, so the timing couldn't be more serendipitous. This reading is not time sensitive to Gemini season per se. However, I feel this reading will find some of you at a moment when you consciously or unconsciously are receptive to the teachings of your duality within and learn how to utilize both sides of your soul. But let's get started with the facts. Gemini is the sign of duality. It is symbolized by the twins, representing two distinct yet inseparable sides of one being. This energy invites us to explore the dual nature within ourselves, which is our light self and our shadow self. You don't need to have Gemini energy in your chart to relate, because we all carry this inner duality. It feels like the perfect time to talk about this during Gemini season because of their essence. Their sign kind of helps illuminate how these parts can coexist and shift and reflect one another like a living, breathing enigma wrapped in a riddle. Just when you think you figured it out, light and shadow self, much like Gemini energy, can shift like the wind and take on new forms to match each other's sides within, kind of trying to create a balance as they spiritually evolve. So let's be real for a second, guys. Most of us find it easier to embrace the light self. This is the version of ourselves that's conscious, kind, socially acceptable, and aligned with love. It's the part we often lead with, so basically our public face. But we also have another side that's just as important and often misunderstood, and that is the shadow self. It lives in the unconscious. It carries the traits we suppress, deny, or feel uncomfortable with. Basically, our raw emotion, our hidden pain, and deep human flaws. But make no mistake, this side of us isn't bad. It holds our boundaries, our instincts, honesty, and truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. The light and shadow selves are both sacred blueprints to our identity. When they are in balance, we feel whole and aligned with our soul's purpose. But when we reject one side, especially the shadow, we live in distortion. Without integration, we risk performing kindness from our ego, giving without boundaries, or masking our pain with forced positivity. I find this is especially true for empaths and lightworkers who haven't yet done the deep work of shadow integration. It's easy to fall into patterns of overgiving, people-pleasing, and carrying emotional burdens that aren't our own. It's important to note, when light self is disconnected from the shadow, they both become ungrounded. True light can't shine to its purest form without balance of shadow. It's kind of like the stars needing the darkness of night to shine. Our light self needs the shadow self to support it from the unconscious, revealing our bright, authentic selves. The shadow self tells us the truth, raw, honest, and unfiltered. It's our protector, our teacher, and our mirror. When we honor both sides, we free ourselves from toxic cycles and move closer to wholeness. Suppressing the shadow often leads to inner turmoil, and if ignored long enough, it can manifest in the mind or the body as an imbalance at first, or even worse, turn into illness. It's important to recognize we live in a world obsessed with the appearance of light, but don't be fooled. Many portray a perfected light self while quietly battling a repressed shadow. But those of us who persevere to integrate both hold the key to self-mastery, allowing the light to transmute what the shadow reveals. So, with all that being said, guys, in the reading today, let's explore your inner duality and reflect on what your light and your shadow self is trying to teach you. Because honestly, integration is the key to becoming the master of your own two sides. Before we start the reading, you have one special task to do for yourself, and that is to pick one of the three images seen here. Take some time to really see what image you connect with. It's best to ask the question, which picture holds the message I need to hear today about my light and my shadow self? Let your intuition guide you. Everyone's antenna receives direction from spirit differently, whether it be a gentle nudge, almost like a whisper, or a swift jolt towards a specific image. You will sense what's best by practicing letting your inner knowing navigate. This is helpful not just for this reading, but for the life circumstances that unfold for you daily. So, let your intuition choose, and let's begin the reading. Hey there, Group 1. Welcome to your Duality Within reading. We're going to take a look at today what your light self and your shadow self have to say through the cards, all right? And we'll start with understanding the characteristics that your shadow self embody. Okay. Oh. Okay, so we're starting off with Dust Devil, moving out of stagnation. Okay, so your shadow self happens to embody movement, helps you move through life at a pretty quick pace. Okay, and you also got Watchers, transpersonal. Okay, and that's really unique to have beside the Dust Devil, because Watchers, they're actually at a standstill. If you have ever observed something, you're generally not in movement. So there's some sort of balance between movement but also absorbing information around you that your shadow self embodies. That's pretty cool. So there's like movement, but there's also standing still. These are the two qualities that you have. Okay, so let's look at some of the strengths of your shadow self. Let's take a look there. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, orphaned. There's a little bit of pain about feeling abandonment in some way. That happens to be your strength. Your story happens to be your strength. And something about the Dust Devil and Orphan that's coming through, you might have moved a lot of places, either physically moved a lot in your young life, or mentally. You've never stayed in one spot or have felt a sense of security in relationships that has been sitting in your shadow self's energy. Okay. Yeah. All right. But that's your strength. Okay. Again, something that has been possibly a difficult energy to work through in your life has been your strength. Okay. And I feel, just a side note, I feel like your story matters. There's something You have to get it out some way, shape, or form. Perhaps through some sort of artistic pursuit. Like maybe painting, writing, music, something creative, okay? Because, again, your story matters, all right? There's something healing about it for you, but it might be healing for others. That's just a side note coming through, because we're really just focusing on the strengths, but other images are coming in here. So just keep that in mind, okay, group one? And also the never-ending story is your strength. Again, here's another difficult card. As you see with both of them, they're a little bit hunched over or looking like, they're dealing with some heavy energy, okay? And with your shadow self, this might be very difficult to handle because, especially with abandonment, you might have pushed people away to protect your own heart, okay? Or you've been in a never-ending cycle of meeting the same certain people coming in. But however, it is your strength, okay? You find strength in some of the pain. You've been able to transmute it, or you will be able to transmute it if you listen to your shadow self, okay? So just keep that in mind. And again, with moving out of stagnation, you might have had a moment in your life where, again, the never-ending story, repeating toxic cycles. You have the ability with your shadow self to move past it, okay? So again, just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at what some of your weaknesses are with regards to your shadow. Okay, the observer, and that's coming up underneath the watchers. Okay, with transpersonal, here's the observer. Isn't that interesting? You can be very methodical, seen with this fox here in the picture. Again, there's something about the way you gather information. However, let your strengths with regards to being able to move past difficult times help you with your weakness, because again, the observer is a little bit of a weakness of your shadow self. Again, perhaps that goes back to the orphan card, all right? Where you're always observing from a distance and never really truly letting anything in. Your shadow self is like, I want to protect you. I want to protect my energy, okay, from being burned before. This weakness, though, can be turned into a positive, or sorry, not a positive, but a strength in a way, that being the observer or the watcher, you gather information from other people's stories, perhaps, and maybe help them get out of toxic cycles by expressing your own story. You know, it gives people a feeling of being able to get out of their own problems, right? Interesting. Okay, so that's what your shadow self kind of embodies, all right? So let's look at some of the light self's qualities, all right? What is group one's light self's qualities? Be gentle with yourself. That's what your light self embodies. I feel like you haven't always done that though. Again, with what's going on with shadow, what shadow's absorbed, kind of the darker side of life. You haven't always been kind to yourself, but you do, it feels like you exude it outward though to those that need a gentle touch or a listening ear. Okay. So let's get some strengths of your light self, group 1. What are some of the strengths that their light self embodies? Regeneration. Wow. Able to come back from anything. Like this tree kind of on the edge. That tree started growing there a long time ago, but life has changed around this tree, and it's, the floor is kind of eroded. The soil is moving away, but it's still finding its way towards life, right? Regeneration. If you haven't found it already, you will find a way to be gentle to yourself, okay? And nurture what you need through this really strong card, okay? You will find your light self again if you haven't already. Through regeneration. Like what I'm saying here, moving out of stagnation with the shadow self, and what pain you've struggled through, it feels like you've transmuted it, or you will, and express it outwardly. And that's where this regeneration of your light self, feeling fully authentically aligned with your light self though. You're only kind of doing half the work here with this be gentle with yourself. You're being gentle with others, it feels like, but your true essence is nurturing your own soul as well. Okay, so let's get a weakness of your light self. So let's say a weakness of group 1's light self. Imagine and deep knowing. I feel like something to do with your third eye, with imagine and deep knowing. There's an inner knowledge that I feel that you have blocked from your light self, trying to tell you something. Okay? And I think you need to reconnect with imagining possibilities within your life, any kind of possibilities, any goals you have, okay? With regards to nurturing something, okay, is very important. And deep knowing, trusting, going back and trusting in your light self to show you the nurturing way. Because it's deep within your soul, okay? You have a lot of wisdom to bestow. That's what I'm saying. Again, your story matters. It's just finding the right creative outlet or creative path to get you there. But there's a lot of doubt, it feels like, with the light self. You've been more comfortable with your shadow is what I'm getting here. Okay. Which is interesting because I said at the beginning of this video that a lot of people tend to be more comfortable with their light self. I'm getting the impression you are more comfortable with what's real, what's tough in life, the painful experiences, because that's where you shine, is being able to make it something beautiful, taking something hard to deal with and creating something beautiful. Interesting. Okay, so when they're both integrated, let's take a look what their strengths are when they're both integrated together, connected. Okay, Spirit, help guide me. Okay, so when light and shadow self are both integrated, forgiveness is what happens. That is your biggest strength. Okay? I acknowledge that harboring resentment blocks the flow of love. And again, there's where your story, your story matters, okay? Your story matters. Because when they're integrated, your shadow self gives you the pain to understand what's happened to you. And with your light self, there's a deep knowing. You carry a lot of knowledge that you can give outward, healing yourself, but also making others feel that they can be gentle with themselves as well, with what they've gone through. Forgiveness, is the key here. You're not only teaching yourself forgiveness and those that you felt have wronged you, you kind of help others allow that energy to flow within them. This is very powerful reading. Okay, so let's do when they're polarized, okay? When both sides are kind of out of balance, what happens? See what the key word is here. Okay. Adversity. Friction, I suppose. I accept that challenges are the best way to learn. So when they've pulled away from each other, it's hard for you to see that your challenges that you face are your greatest strength, okay? Wow, that's very beautiful, guys. This is an interesting reading. Okay, so we're going to close the reading with one last message to sum up what both shadow and light self have to close the reading with, okay? What last message do you have for group 1? Find your haven. Find your haven. There is a place of wonder waiting just for you. Okay. There is a sacred space for you somewhere, okay, where I think, I said this before, your story needs to be heard. You need to find a creative area where you can let your creative juices flow. Okay, because I feel like this is part of your life's purpose, all right? Because you have a very powerful light and shadow self that's coming through, all right? And again, with that whole, you kind of actually draw more strength from the shadow is very interesting coming up here in this reading. But find that haven for yourself, I think, is the message about a solid space for integration of both light and shadow self to again, let those creative juices flow. Because, of course, your story matters, group 1. Okay? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye. Hey there, group 2. Welcome to your Duality Within reading. We're going to take a look at what your light and shadow selves messages are for you today. And we're going to get started by looking at what characteristics your shadow self embodies. Okay? Drifter, experiencing life as it comes. Okay, so we're kind of similar to one of the other readings, as they were, their shadow self was kind of an adventurous spirit as well. Okay, going with the flow. And again, with this dark, shadowy forest, you go through it with open eyes, open heart, and again, an adventurous spirit as to letting things happen to you instead of trying to control it. You definitely have a wild side within your shadow self. Okay, so let's look at some of the strengths of your shadow. Time to go. Again, this is kind of solidifying what we're talking about here as a drifter. You're always on to the next best thing. Your shadow self definitely pulls you in all sorts of interesting and creative directions, okay? Which leads me to believe that you don't hold on to anything that is toxic within the soul. You seem to have a very forgiving nature as you're able to move forward, move on with life. Okay, so that's a good strength of your shadow self. All right, and we're going to look at the weaknesses of your shadow. Okay, poised. So you might not be the most glamorous or do things with poise. You definitely get to where you're going, but it might be a messy and chaotic way to get there, to whatever it is that you're going after, okay? It tends to be a weakness, but there's a side note here of it's important not to forget, though, that even though you might not be the most graceful, at least your shadow isn't the most graceful personality trait of getting towards your goals, you're very authentic about your process, okay? Yes, this was much of a struggle. Like some people, they put on things that they've made, this is just an example, handmade with love, you know? And you think, oh, how sweet is that? I could see you putting something that says, handmade with frustration. You make beautiful things is what I'm saying, okay? Whatever it is that you do. But there's this authentic part of your shadow self that says, I have struggled to get where I want to be. And that can be very refreshing, I think, as well. Even though it can be a little bit of a weakness because disorganization and chaos can be a struggle, okay? Again, there's this other message coming through of people appreciate someone who's created something beautiful, and to get there was really an adventure in itself, okay? So just keep that in mind, group 2. Let's take a look at what your light self embodies, okay? Okay, what do we get here? Maintain your childlike spirit. Okay, and that kind of ties into your shadow self here with that poised card. Most children, at least I find, live in a bubble of chaos and mess. But yet, it's something beautiful to watch. Yes, we have to, reorganize things later on. But I think that's where they're most creative, when they just let things become a little chaotic in their environment. So I think your light self is trying to remind you of this supposed weakness of your shadow. Okay? That's why I said there's like a reminder that there's something beautiful about the process of your creativity. Okay? And you must maintain that childlike spirit, because it enables your light self to shine bright fully. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at what the strengths are of your light self. Okay. Chaos and conflict. Okay, so not only does your shadow self share in chaos and within a process, so does your light self. And also mending. That's another strength of your light self. You can help fix things. Almost like breaking down the old to make way for the new. When something has been broken, you can find a way to mend it back together within your light self, but in a new creative way. You find a new creative, I'm drawn to a vision of like a quilt or something, and a piece of it gets ripped off, and the whole quilt is one color, but you find a unique way to sew in a new piece of it that is creative and different. It doesn't match the quilt, but it stands out in a way that makes the quilt unique and beautiful in a new way. Okay, so take that little visualization how you will. But again, your light self thrives in the chaos and a little bit of the conflict. You find resolution in conflict, almost like you like to put the puzzle pieces together. Okay, and there's a side note here. This zebra is trying to pass himself off as a giraffe. Your light self is asking you, try not to dim your light for others, okay, to fit in, because everybody else is a giraffe, and you happen to be the only zebra. Your light self is asking you to let it shine authentically, even if it doesn't fit in, okay? That's just a side note. So just keep that in mind, group 2. There's something, everybody likes a very clean process about something, yet you're very comfortable within the mess, the chaos. And that's what makes you unique, especially with your light and shadow self both speaking on this. Okay? And let's get a card for your weakness, your light self's weakness. Building blocks. Okay, there's that structure again. Again, everybody, I was just saying, everybody likes that clean process and putting every block where it belongs, you know? But that happens to be your light self's weakness. You don't operate that way. And again, I feel like your light self is asking you to let it authentically shine through as is, as that zebra, not that giraffe. Okay? Which is kind of interesting. All right, so let's take a look at what both sides, what's a word that both sides, when integrated, looks like. Okay. Oh, okay, that's too many. Let's try that again. When integrated, What is a solid word for group 2? Freedom. How fitting. I feel like both sides are speaking to you about wanting to be free. There's something about your true identity and wanting to fully embrace all aspects of yourself. I possess the power and the free will to create my own happiness. Okay. Again, if there's something you're creative about or something that you enjoy to do and you have a certain way of doing it, this is your light and shadow self kind of drawing your attention to and giving you permission to go forth in your unique way of doing things, okay? Because it brings you freedom, okay? Which is very important. Interesting. And just keep in mind something to do with the blue in this picture. Something to do with the throat chakra, so self-expression. Again, there's something about your unique blueprint that is yearning to be fully understood, fully out in the open, fully vulnerable, and free to express itself on both sides, light and dark, or light and shadow. Okay. So let's take a look at when they're polarized, when they're not working together. What's a solid word? Guilt. Okay, there's a sense of guilt that comes up. It can shake you to your core here. I release any beliefs that no longer assist with my soul's growth. Well, there you go, group 2. Any beliefs, perhaps you've been somewhat ridiculed for your unique self-expression, because as you see here, there's the blue and the orange, and this is possibly the blue mixing with this guilt. So some sort of self-expression has been mixed with guilt, okay? And possibly shame. Feeling ashamed of who you are, or you have in the past perhaps. This is light and shadow self saying there's nothing to be ashamed of. It is just your unique way of doing things. And it looks like it's very different than most. And it's just, the big message here, I think, is asking you to just shine authentically. Okay. And let's get one last message from your light and shadow self to close the reading. Write a letter. Write a letter to your inner child. Interesting. There's that self-expression coming through again. Okay. Maybe you're really good with words. As blue is the throat chakra, it also can take many forms, like writing, speaking, and all that. If you're not comfortable with writing, even speaking out loud to yourself, to your inner child, about something to do about this guilt, okay? Speak to your light and shadow self. Tell your inner child how much you accept and love and cherish who you are, okay? There seems to be a very gentle message here about this. Self-acceptance is key. Anyway, group 2, I hope you liked this reading. I hope it gave you some clarity of your light and shadow self. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye. Hey there, group 3. Welcome to your Duality Within reading. We're going to take a look at what your light self and your shadow self's messages are for you today. And we'll get started by taking a look at what the characteristics are that your shadow self embody. All right. So what is group 3 shadow self characteristics? Spirit of the river, movement toward adventure. Okay, that's pretty cool. There's a real sense of your shadow self personality enjoying risky situations, unknown situations, things that some people would shy away from. Seems to me you run towards things that might be a little uncomfortable for most. Okay, you're kind of like that spirit of the river, which kind of goes with the flow of life. You don't always know where it's taking you, but I get a very flexible feeling towards whatever comes your way. You charge forward towards it with courage and strength. Okay, so that's lurking in your shadow self. But let's look at some of the strengths of your shadow self, besides adventurous spirit. Okay, what are some of the strengths, spirit? Whoop. Oh boy. Okay, got a mess going on here. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, here we go. Your strength is a loyal heart to that of which you are passionate about. It's not just relationships, although that's very clear here that you are very loyal to the people that you love around you. You're very loyal to what you believe in and any wisdom that you attain. Seen here with the owls signifies loyalty to integrity. Okay. Anyway, let's take a look at what your weaknesses are for your shadow self. Feels like you kind of honor your shadow self here with the crowns. You see your value in your, I guess, darker side, as a shadow is can be harsh truths and kind of you have a strong presence that demands respect, is what I'm getting with the loyal heart as well. Just a side note. Okay, but we're going to look at some of the weaknesses here. Okay, thinker. Okay, so generally being a thinker isn't a bad thing, but perhaps you're a little bit of an overthinker, okay? Which is kind of interesting, since we're talking about integrity. That that thinking quality comes in handy for the loyal heart, but there seems to be an after effect of, with the spirit of the river, sometimes you jump into things that are, you act before you think about things, and then after you're like, oh, did I make a right decision there? That seems to lurk in your shadow self, the weakness of feeling regret or questioning your past choices. Okay, so now let's take a look at what your light self embodies, group number 3. Okay, we got 2. Okay, your light self says, catch your breath. Acceptance of love. You have a very strong heart chakra for sure. Okay, you resonate and vibrate on a love level on most times, all right? But with this, catch your breath. Feels like both shadow and light self sometimes need to take a step back and slow down, okay? Because you are that spirit of the river that just flows with things. It is important to take a step back and catch your breath and enjoy the slower moments in life, okay? But that's what your light self embodies. I feel like you will fulfill that light self a little more if you take the time to slow down and, as they say, smell the roses, okay? Take time for the quieter moments or the simple things in life, okay? That seems to be what your light self is expressing right now, all right? Okay, so let's look at some of the strengths of your light self. Peace. Again, I said you resonate on a heart chakra level, a very balanced heart chakra level, because you create peace around you. Wherever there's imbalance or adversity or conflict, it seems you're able to take two sides and like white and black and be the gray in the middle to help them understand each other a bit better, okay? As you're represented here as the dove, okay? Kind of like the peacemaker, okay? And let's take a look at your weakness, your light self's weakness. Unfinished symphony. Okay, so your shadow self kind of struggles with the same issue. Okay, again, there's that catch your breath. Okay, because you might be missing out on things that mean something to you, okay, that should be finished. Because again, there's that thinker card within the shadow, going back and being like, oh, I should have finished that project, or I should have done, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? There's a message here from both light and shadow self, asking you to take a slower approach in life, okay, so you're not missing out on those finer details. Okay. Okay, so when they're integrated, let's take a look there. When they're integrated, both light and shadow self, what is a solid word that can describe that? When they're working on the same level, you have imagination. Imagination. And it is a violet color, so you're very in touch with your crown chakra. Okay, I embrace and nourish the creative aspect of my mind. When they're in balance, when both light and shadow are in balance, those unfinished symphonies are able to be done, completed. You feel whole, okay? Okay. And let's take a look at when they're polarized, when they're not working together. What's a solid word that can describe that? Whoop. Okay. Balance. Okay, balance. I bring a state of perfect harmony into my world, and I do so without judgment. So you might feel a little out of balance, which everybody would when your two sides are polarized, but there's a sense of feeling solid within. And I really feel this overthinking comes into play when the two sides are polarized, okay? Because of this one sentence, I do so without judgment. So there's much judgment about your actions you might feel. Your shadow self speaks up and says, oh, we should have done it this way, or I missed that, and oh, there's not enough time for whatever it is you're embarking on. There's lots of judgment that comes from your shadow, which kind of hinders your light self to have those symphonies finish. Okay, metaphorically, symphonies can be whatever you're passionate about. Okay, because it's there, group 3. Acceptance of love. You vibrate on a love level, so you are able to create whatever it is that you see fit, and you have the imagination to do it. Okay, it's just making sure that you slow down enough to hear both your light and shadow self. Okay, but with this reading, I don't feel that one side is more dominant than the other. I think they kind of work within each other. Again, I feel like you're that gray ground of balance for others around you, okay? But you might be picking up on other people's energy with this catch your breath. There might be people around you that struggle with anxiety or feeling like they're in a rush all the time, and sometimes you pick up on that, and that pulls you out of balance, okay? So just keep that in mind to cleanse or clear at the end of the day. Do something that slows you down and rekindles that relationship with yourself, okay? Because you're a peaceful being, you know? Give that love that you give so easily to others to yourself by slowing down, okay? All right. And one last message from your light and shadow self today. Let's take a look. What's one last message? What's one last message for group 3? All right. What we got here? You know the way. Trust your intuition on this journey. Okay? Seems like, again, you know how to get yourself in balance. You know what it is that serves both your light and shadow self, okay? You're very in tune with both sides. That's what I'm saying. As you being the gray in the middle, you're very in tune with both sides, and you let both sides give and take. There's not much friction or a hard time integrating the two. It's just important to not let outer influence have you feeling like you can't catch your breath. Breath is within the lungs, which is the heart chakra, which is your strong point. That's what I'm saying. So there's another small message here of learning to protect your heart chakra a little better, okay? Because you're picking up on other things. When you're naturally grounded and breathe easily and are a peaceful being, people that aren't so peaceful, that are kind of anxiety ridden, are drawn to that part of your light self, okay? Okay. All right, group 3, I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.